In a remote village nestled deep within the Korean countryside, during the rigid and often cruel Joseon era, lived Lee Jinsa, a landlord notorious not for his generosity, but for his insatiable greed and peculiar lust. He was a man of around 40, his face round and plump, marked by beady, cunning eyes and a thin, wispy mustache that quivered with every deceitful scheme he concocted. Lee Jinsa was wealthy, his coffers overflowing with the earnings squeezed from the impoverished villagers who toiled on his lands. But his wealth did little to satisfy his desires. Instead, it fueled his avarice and his twisted obsession with married women, particularly his penchant for collecting their undergarments as trophies of his conquests. The village itself was a somber reflection of the era. Strict social hierarchies dictated every aspect of life, and ancient, often oppressive, customs held sway. Lee Jinsa's house, though large and built of sturdy wood, was sparsely furnished, reflecting his stinginess. It sat on a slight rise overlooking the village, a constant reminder of his dominance. The air within its walls was thick with a sense of unease, mirroring the landlord's dark and twisted nature. His wife, Jong Ssi Bin, was a woman of quiet intelligence and sharp wit, a stark contrast to her husband. Around 35, her beauty was not striking, but her eyes held a depth of understanding and a quiet strength that belied her outward appearance. She was the daughter of a fallen nobleman, forced into marriage with Lee Jinsa to settle her family's debts. She managed the household with a calm efficiency, her true feelings for her husband hidden beneath a veneer of polite indifference. She saw through his lechery and foolishness, holding him in silent contempt. One day, at the bustling village market, a place where vendors hawked their wares and gossip spread like wildfire, a new face appeared. Wulmi, a woman of striking beauty and undeniable allure, set up a small stall selling trinkets and fabrics. Her eyes, bright and mischievous, seemed to dance with a hidden fire, and her smile held a hint of seduction. She was accompanied by a man introduced as her husband, Park Seo-bang, thin and wiry, with a face etched with hardship but eyes that glinted with a cunning that mirrored his supposed wife's. In truth, they were not husband and wife, but a pair of skilled con artists, preying on the weaknesses of wealthy, lustful men. Lee Jinsa, ever on the prowl, soon noticed Wulmi. Her beauty captivated him, her every gesture, every glance, fueling his desires. He began to frequent the market, ostensibly to buy supplies, but in reality, to feast his eyes on her. He'd linger at her stall, making awkward attempts at conversation, his gaze lingering on her in a way that was both obvious and repulsive. "Ah, such fine silks you have," he'd stammer, his voice thick with lust. "Surely, a woman of your beauty deserves only the best." Wulmi would smile demurely, her eyes sparkling with feigned innocence. "You are too kind, Jinsanim. But I am a simple woman, content with what I have." Her words, however, belied her actions. She'd subtly flirt with him, a slight brush of her hand against his, a lingering glance, all calculated to ensnare him in her web. Park Seo-bang, meanwhile, played the part of the oblivious husband, watching from the sidelines, a smirk playing on his lips as he witnessed Lee Jinsa fall deeper and deeper into their trap. The first twist in their devious play had been successfully set. He needed only to reel him into his lair. The whispers and knowing looks in the village increased with each passing day. The whispers reached Jong Ssi Bin, carried on the winds of gossip that permeated the village. She was not surprised. Her husband's lechery was as predictable as the sunrise. But this time, something felt different. There was a calculated coldness in Wulmi's beauty, a shrewdness in Park Seo-bang's eyes that hinted at a deeper game. Jong Ssi Bin decided to observe, to wait, her mind already weaving plans of her own. Lee Jinsa, consumed by his lust, became increasingly bold. He started sending Wulmi gifts, expensive trinkets and fabrics, hoping to win her favor. He even began to neglect his duties as a landlord, spending his days at the market, showering Wulmi with unwanted attention. His obsession was becoming a public spectacle, a source of amusement and disgust for the villagers. One evening, under the cloak of darkness, Li Jinsa arranged a clandestine meeting with Wulmi. He promised her riches, a life of luxury, if only she would leave her supposed husband and become his. Wulmi, playing her part perfectly, feigned reluctance, then hesitant agreement, her eyes gleaming with avarice masked by a veil of false modesty. "But my husband, he is a good man," she whispered, her voice trembling with feigned emotion. "I cannot simply abandon him." "Leave him to me," Li Jinsa said, his voice thick with desire. "I will provide for him. He will want for nothing. You will be mine, and you will have everything your heart desires." As they embraced, their bodies pressed together in the shadows, Park Seobang, who had been secretly following them, discovered them. He erupted in a carefully orchestrated display of rage, shouting accusations, threatening violence. "You vile snake," he roared at Li Jinsa. "You dare defile my wife? I will have your blood." Li Jinsa, caught in the act, was terrified. He stammered apologies, pleaded for forgiveness, offering Park Seobang money to keep quiet. But Park Seobang, fueled by feigned fury, refused. "Money cannot buy back my honor," he declared. "You have stolen my wife's virtue. There is only one way to settle this. An ancient custom. A ritual of cleansing." He demanded that Li Jinsa undergo a bizarre ritual to purify himself, a ritual involving strange incantations and the sacrifice of a precious object. And, as a final, shocking demand, he insisted on spending a night with Zhang Ssi Bin, as a form of symbolic retribution. A twisted eye for an eye. A wife for a wife, and a bizarre show, all in one, to milk the fool for everything he was worth. Li Jinsa, blinded by lust and fear, was horrified. The thought of his wife. Even though he held her in contempt, being with another man was unbearable. He pleaded and bargained, offering more money, land, anything to avoid this humiliation. The second twist, tightening with the force of a noose. Zhang Ssi Bin, informed of the situation, appeared surprisingly calm. She saw this not as a threat, but as an opportunity. An opportunity to finally rid herself of her repulsive husband, or at the very least, to teach him a lesson he would never forget. She realized there was more at stake than the simple transaction. It was her dignity. And she refused to let it be tarnished by the twisted desires of two scoundrels. Zhang Ssi Bin, with a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, agreed to Park Seobang's outrageous demands. Her acquiescence, however, was a calculated move, a key component of the intricate trap she was beginning to weave. Inside, a storm of emotions raged, disgust for her husband, anger at the audacity of Park Seobang and Wulmi, and a burning desire for retribution. But on the surface, she maintained a facade of serene composure, her face an unreadable mask. "Very well," she said, her voice steady and devoid of emotion. "If this is what custom demands, then so be it. But the ritual must be performed correctly. We need the guidance of a wise and knowledgeable person." She suggested consulting Ibang, the village shaman, a man known for his knowledge of ancient rituals and his unsettling, enigmatic presence. Ibang lived in a secluded hut on the edge of the sacred forest, a place shrouded in mystery and whispered tales of strange powers. Li Jinsa, already riddled with anxiety, was further unnerved by the mention of Ibang. He had heard rumors of the shaman's potent spells and his ability to communicate with spirits. Zhang Ssi Bin, however, secretly met with Ibang, explaining the situation and enlisting his help. She revealed the true nature of Park Seobang and Wulmi, their scheme to defraud her foolish husband. Ibang, with his piercing gaze and unsettling smile, listened intently, his mind already working on a plan. He agreed to participate, seeing an opportunity to not only aid Zhang Ssi Bin but also to punish the deceitful couple. The third twist, subtle and almost unnoticed, had taken place. The stage was set for the elaborate deception. Under the pretense of preparing for the ritual, Zhang Ssi Bin began to subtly manipulate Li Jinsa. She played on his superstitions, his fear of the supernatural, and his inflated ego. She told him that the ritual required him to be completely submissive, to follow Ibang's instructions without question, and to believe wholeheartedly in its power. The spirits are easily angered, she warned him. Her voice low and serious. Any doubt, any resistance, could have dire consequences. You must trust in Ibang, and you must trust in me. Li Jinsa, caught between his lust for Wulmi and his fear of the unknown, was a bundle of nerves. He was easy prey for Zhang Ssi Bin's subtle manipulations. She, meanwhile, continued to meet with Ibang, refining their plan, ensuring that every detail was perfect. The ritual was not meant to cleanse Li Jinsa, but to expose him, to humiliate him, and to break his spirit. The night of the supposed ritual arrived, filled with an eerie tension. The sacred forest, shrouded in darkness, seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the murmur of Ibang's strange incantations. The first stage of the unraveling had begun. Li Jinsa, stripped of his fine clothes and adorned with strange symbols painted on his skin, trembled before Ibang. The shaman, his face illuminated by the flickering firelight, chanted in a low, guttural voice, his words incomprehensible to the terrified landlord. Wulmi and Park Seobang watched from the shadows, their faces betraying a mixture of anticipation and unease. They were confident in their deception, but the eerie atmosphere and Ibang's unsettling presence stirred a flicker of doubt within them. Zhang Ssi Bin, veiled and seemingly submissive, stood beside her husband, her outward appearance belying the steely resolve in her heart. She was the puppet master, pulling the strings of this elaborate charade, guiding it towards its inevitable, humiliating climax. Ibang, following the meticulously crafted plan, announced that the spirits demanded a sacrifice, a precious object representing Li Jinsa's greatest desire. Li Jinsa, his mind clouded by fear and lust, readily agreed, offering a small, ornate box containing his collection of stolen undergarments, the trophies of his perverse conquests. This act, witnessed by everyone present, was the first step in his public shaming. The shaman then declared that Li Jinsa must be cleansed in a secluded part of the forest. He led the trembling landlord away, leaving Wulmi, Park Seobang, and Zhang Ssi Bin behind. The tension was palpable, the silence broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant hooting of an owl. What followed was a carefully orchestrated illusion. Ibang, using his knowledge of herbs and sleight of hand, made it appear as though Li Jinsa had been transformed into a grotesque, animalistic creature, a manifestation of his inner depravity. In reality, a carefully crafted dummy, hidden amongst the trees, was substituted for the landlord. When Park Seobang was summoned to complete the ritual, by spending the night with the transformed Zhang Ssi Bin, he approached with a mixture of triumph and trepidation. He believed he had won, that he was about to claim his prize. He entered the darkened hut, where a figure lay shrouded in blankets, seemingly asleep. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and pulled back the covers. Instead of the serene face of Zhang Ssi Bin, he was confronted with the grotesque, hairy visage of what he believed to be Li Jinsa, transformed into a beast. He recoiled in horror, screaming in terror. This was not the refined lady he'd craved, but a hairy monster, a twisted reflection of the man he'd sought to deceive. The first unraveling. The exposure of the deception. The scream shattered the night's eerie silence, bringing everyone rushing to the hut. Zhang Ssi Bin, feigning shock and horror, rushed to comfort the terrified Park Seobang. Ibang, maintaining his mystical persona, declared that the ritual had gone awry, that Li Jinsa's inner demons had been unleashed. Wulmi, realizing that their scheme had been exposed, tried to flee, but the villagers, alerted by the commotion and guided by Zhang Ssi Bin's earlier subtle instructions, were waiting. They seized the deceitful couple, their anger fueled by the revelation of their lies and their attempt to exploit the community's superstitions. Li Jinsa, meanwhile, was brought back, still shaken and confused, but unharmed. He was confronted with the evidence of his own folly, the box of stolen undergarments. The testimony of the villagers, and the mocking laughter of Park Seo-bang, who, now exposed, had nothing to lose by revealing the truth. The carefully constructed facade of Lee Jinsa's power and prestige crumbled before him. He was revealed not as a powerful landlord, but as a pathetic, lecherous fool, easily manipulated and deceived. His reputation, his pride, his very sense of self, lay in ruins. Jong Ssi Bin, her revenge complete, watched with a quiet satisfaction. She had not only protected her own honor but had also exposed the hypocrisy and corruption that festered beneath the surface of their seemingly orderly village. She had used the very tools of oppression, superstition and social hierarchy, to dismantle the power of her oppressor. The villagers, initially swayed by Lee Jinsa's wealth and status, now saw him for what he truly was. They banished Park Seo-bang and Woolmi from the village, their dreams of riches shattered. As for Lee Jinsa, he was left a broken man, stripped of his dignity and his authority. He became a recluse. A shadow of his former self, haunted by the memory of his humiliation. The once feared and despised landlord now lived a shell, a ghost of his former might. The unraveling was complete. The deceiver, deceived. The powerful, humbled. Jong Ssi Bin, free from the shadow of her husband's depravity, found a newfound sense of peace and purpose. She used her intelligence and her position to improve the lives of the villagers, dismantling the unjust practices that Lee Jinsa had imposed. The village, once oppressed by his greed, began to flourish under her wise and compassionate guidance. The lesson was clear: true power lay not in wealth or brute force, but in intelligence, resilience, and a commitment to justice. The tables had turned, and the era of oppression was replaced by a nascent, if fragile, hope.